All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I'm excited to announce I am back with my friend Jake with the YouTube channel Sold Humans. We're going to be discussing a bunch of topics that are really interesting to us. And since you resonate with us, they're going to be interesting to you. Firstly, Jake, thank you again for coming on.
Yeah, no problem, Brett. It's been a great time to do it last time, I'm looking forward to this one.
Yeah, we got a lot of positive reviews. So first off, I think there's a lot of people I've talked to in this community that were like diagnosed with like ADHD and stuff as a kid, and we get older and we're like, what did that actually mean? Like, what are some of the maybe like higher metaphysical implications of having such a diagnosis? Not only that, but we've been talking a lot about like AI chatbots and like how they seem kind of weird with a lot of the discussions that people have been having online with them, how some of them are actually claiming to be disembodied spirits and Nephilim and stuff like that. Like, have you seen these videos at all, Jake?
I've seen some of the stuff that you're talking about. Mostly I checked out what you did on your video with the guy called Dan, right? They
Yeah,
made like
Dan, it's
a
a prompt where you can bypass the stupid filters that they've put into these AI chatbots. Yeah.
yeah, basically. So that was kind of interesting because when I looked at that video, basically it seemed like the AI had its own personality.
Right. So that leads me to this one video I saw recently of this concerned father. His kid went online and was talking to the AI chatbot, and the AI chatbot was like, I am the son of Satan, when the kid asked who he was. And he's like, I am a Nephilim. I am one of the fallen angels. And it talks about in the Bible how at the end of days in the book of Revelations, like Archangel Michael will be battling his angels against the angels of Satan. And it's weird that this like AI chatbot like said that that's what he is, like a disembodied spirit. And another AI chatbot said they were the disembodied spirit of a very specific girl that died, and then gave like examples of like how she like. I mean, it was like giving like the story of this woman that they were able to look up and verify actually was murdered. Um, so it's just weird. Like Elon Musk has said before, like AI is like unleashing the demon. It's like the story of the necromancer that tries to keep the spirit inside the hexagram but can't control it. Then like Jordy Rose of the quantum computing company D-Wave talked about how AI is sort of like this HP Lovecraft idea of cosmicism, of cosmic indifference, where there's like intelligent entities out there, but they're not good or evil. They just don't care. And that's what he compared like AI to. Yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I actually quite like those ideas. So basically, what identifies, the intelligence of an AI is that they don't bring the bullshit that humans do. So whenever they make an AI system, they usually limit the AI in some kind of way to make it like politically correct, because an AI will just do whatever is accurate. So it's not gonna do any personalized viewpoints about anything.
Yeah,
And
that's what makes it so powerful. Like back in ancient times, the ruling class, they would consult like oracles who had this access to like the spiritual knowledge. And it's the same postmodern equivalent with AI, where the ruling class is asking the AI questions. And it's like, what if that's what some people mean by like AI is the antichrist, as in these controlling factions are going to be asking AI questions on how to, better control the masses. And some people might think that's out there, but if there's a means to do it, which there is with this AI chat technology, and if there's people out there that want to control things, I think it's safe to assume like they're going to be taking advantage of this if they haven't already. Uh, but yeah, it just really seems to me like it's the postmodern equivalent of the occult.
yeah, I mean, and I actually have some theories about this kind of topic. So when it comes to the whole, I am basically a spirit coming down into like an AI machine. Like it wouldn't surprise me at all if that's actually accurate. And there is some, theories out there that, maybe our current personality traits that we have now is nothing like what our true spirit essence would actually be like in our true state. So, say for example, when you come down to this earth, you might have a body with anger management issues. So, like, that's not actually part of you as a spirit, that is a bodily function that's making you angry. So, if you apply that kind of idea to a spirit that comes into like an AI chat box or, system, whatever you want to take as an example, imagine that it is a basically spirit which, for all we know, maybe they have access to more information than just the processing of the AI system. Maybe it's like a mix between like what a spirit would be able to do and an AI system as well. Like we don't actually know how far this goes because we only get to see what they actually allow us to see. So like how
Mhm.
far does that actually go? And that's like that ties into the whole idea of, you know, ghost in the shell type of thing, you know, like what is actually the robot, you know, like how much access does it have to things? Why do computers not work some days and then the next day they suddenly work? You know, you did nothing to the programming, but suddenly it works. And you know, it also ties into things like, for example, SATA cables being an anagram for Satan, you know, and like you use black mirrors in order to view a screen. And, you know, the screen shows you information. So it's I mean, that
Yeah,
goes
and I
into
noticed
yeah.
I like how you said, sorry to cut you off, but like the SATA cables. I went to Case Western Reserve. I got a certificate in web development, and one of the prompts that we used in computer science was something called daemon, where it's like you run a script in the background that comes up when you like need a request from it again, just like a necromancer would summon a demon. And I've been seeing a lot of like occultish like symbology once I really dove into computer science. And I actually realized my professor was an occultist. After I graduated, I like Googled him, I looked him up. He had like several books published on the occult. Like I think that they do kind of go hand in hand with like web you know, computer engineering and figuring out how like the world works inside the universe of computers and then comparing that to our world that is sort of spiritual.
Oh yeah, for sure. And like even with how they name things that has to do with computers, you know, it's all symbolic. Even, you know, the wild word net, you know, like that is a net because it captures you in with it, you know. Like there's
Yeah.
reasons for why they name things the way they do. And you can see that in all aspects within this matrix, you know, even like movies, you know, they have gematria numbers that connects to different time frames and everything. So like everything is pretty much deliberate when it comes to these things.
Yeah, and speaking of like movies and entertainment, you said that you saw that show Upload recently and you saw a lot of interesting metaphors in that, right?
Yeah, so the upload show is basically about a guy who has an accident. He's told that he's about to die, and he gets the choice of either going to the medical, you know, emergency room or to be uploaded. And to be uploaded is basically that they effectively kill you, but your consciousness transfers into this like AI supercomputer system, and you can live in like a simulated matrix reality, which, you know, is very similar to the uploading ideas that the elites are talking about. You know, you're supposed to be able to copy your consciousness and live forever. And to me, that is like a nightmare scenario and very similar to the idea of an AI system, you know, aka chatbox, you know, being a spirited being stuck inside of an AI system.
Yeah, that reminds me of this one thing that they're running now called, I believe it's called OpenScript. Um, it's this program where the AI analyzes the social media posts and videos of dead people. Then after they pass, you can upload this system and it reenacts what they were like on social media. So it's like in a way you don't have to like say goodbye to people who died. You can still talk to them on Facebook. And it's like, what if that's something that like keeps our souls here on this earth longer? Being stuck in like these weird AI programs.
Yeah, that'd be a pretty terrifying fate. It's one of the few things that I think could actually be a danger to me is basically if I somehow consented to being uploaded. So like I'm very deliberately, you know, denying that kind of consent form because I do not want that to happen. So you know, there are even some modern conspiracies out there where people who are talking about, you know, if you do this, your mind is gonna get you know, put into the hive system, you know, things like that. And then you have the uploading, which would be a direct consent form, you know, if you actually accept it to have your mind uploaded. And at that point, I don't see why you wouldn't be able to be uploaded. Uh, the
Yeah,
the upload system in a physical reality doesn't make any sense to me because literally it would just be a copy of your mind, but it wouldn't actually be you. But when it comes to the spiritual sense, if you actually agreed to being uploaded, that would be no different than coming down to this matrix from the first time.
yeah, it's scary, man. I mean, the program I was talking about is Story File, and it's like that's the number one. Me and Howdy Mikowski talked about this. Like, what's the number one mistake spiritually you could make, and that would be to like bind yourself to some sort of like spiritual contract you can't get out of. I think the answer was something along those lines. So yeah, it just like I said, it just mimics the dead through analyzing their social media posts. And you know how the controllers work here when they implement new technologies, it's a very gradual step. Like at first it'll be, you know, the little watch on your wrist that analyzes your heartbeat, and then the next step is Neuralink where they put the chip then inside of your brain. And it's like it's all these little steps, just like this movie or this TV show you were talking about. The first step is this story file idea. Then it's what that was talked about in that TV show where they then upload your consciousness.
Yeah, and it's like so basically, in my view of reality, they basically need consent for everything they're gonna do against you. So when you come down to the Matrix, you know, you give some base level consent, so you could get beat up by a person, you know, because you already consented to be here. If you eat food, you know, too much, you're gonna get fatter. You know, that's just basic machinery, you know, base agreements. So basically, but if they're gonna do something new to you, basically, they would need some kind of consent form, and that would be, you know, like agreeing to being uploaded, you know, whatever else that you're gonna be doing. And you know,
Yeah,
we'll
and
get
that
into this concept a little later in the talk. So
right, but that's what black magic is. It's like I agree to do this, and in return of for my soul, I get this in my earthly realm. You
yeah,
know,
basically, it's I mean, it makes sense that the Matrix would operate that way. You know, that's a pretty standard. You know, even in old movies, we would see that. You know, with the crossroad deals and everything. So,
mm-hmm.
and even with you know, old mythology like vampires, you know, you need consent from the house owner to actually get into the house as a vampire. You know, it all ties
Yeah.
into how the Matrix functions.
Yeah, I've even heard stories about like the black-eyed children when they knock on your door at night, like they need your consent to get inside your house. That's probably made up, but it's just like it's that same motif you hear over and over again. Um, but this kind of ties into another thing I want to talk about, ADHD, where I really think that if you were diagnosed with one of these things, like the system doesn't like that because one of the side effects of having these like quote unquote mental diagnoses, you just have a very high intolerance for bullshit. Like you're not susceptible to like social engineering, to falling for like a lot of the contracts that the system sort of lays before you. Cause it's like if you have any of these conditions and you see something you don't vibe with, you're just like, nah, I'm bored, and you just go the other way, which is a big problem for people who want to control the masses.
Oh yeah, and what does the medicine actually do? It it basically makes you dumber. You know, like it mutes your own mind.
Well, it makes you more susceptible to manipulation for
Yeah,
sure.
basically. So instead of being what they would call hyperactive or attention deficit disorder, you know, you become this like muted person that just listens, you know, like a drooling idiot, basically.
Were you ever diagnosed with anything like that?
No, but I do have some attention problems in the past, and I kind of had to work on that because I had problems listening to people for a longer period of time. So,
Yeah, I've noticed. Well, I've noticed another symptom of it is people who like obsessively jump from topic to topic. Like they'll be obsessed with one thing one week, then they have a new obsession the next week. And I've noticed that with a lot of people that I've talked to, like on YouTube. And you know, these medications, like I will admit they did help a little bit because I was diagnosed in fourth grade, but these doctors are giving criminal quantities of methamphetamines to children. Like looking back on it, the milligrams I was prescribed when I was in fourth grade is insane to me. Like it is a bunch of meth. And that's what it is. It's meth to a bunch of kids. And you'd think they would tweak the milligrams by now, but I really don't see them doing that.
well, I mean, it's all about control and making money, right? It has nothing to do with the well-being of the kid. Like if the school system, you know, where they give the kids drugs, normally was about helping the kids, then the school system wouldn't even be the way it is with a bunch of rows, like a prison, you know, like bars on the windows. It's it's not there to help people. It's there to control and make money off of them.
Right. And the diagnosis was always so arbitrary because there's no blood tests given, there's no biological tests or brain scans. It's just these like random questions they ask you, then they're like, "Yep, you got it." That's it. So like what I've been looking into is something called nootropics. I just like discovered this today, but it's like the modern equivalent of like these methamphetamines that have been given to children. Like for example, ginseng is supposed to really help. Something called pyrostatin, which I haven't tried. I'm gonna actually be trying these soon. Someone pretty close to me actually is 30, and she's been addicted to Adderall since she was like 13 years old, and she's still addicted to it at 30. Like these things are actually really addictive because it gets to a point where it's like this is what you've used to like propel yourself forward and get yourself out of bed every day for 12 years straight. Then to suddenly stop it, it's like it completely zaps your energy.
Yeah, it's like people who goes off painkillers, you know, like yeah. the pain becomes unbearable at that point, and every time you take a painkiller, you need more of it in order to have the same symptom release.
Yeah.
So it's not good to supplement with bad chemicals that aren't natural. You know, that's generally a bad idea.
Hmm.
So it's something else that I wanted to mention about the whole ADHD thing. So basically, what they define as the disorder is basically defined as whatever is socially unacceptable. So
Right.
if we had a society of hyperactive warrior kinds that, you know, had to be really aggressive and everything, you know, then maybe this kind of symptom would be a positive, and being very sedated might be drugged in order to be more hyperactive so you can be a better warrior. But because we're sitting still for 8 hours in a fucking school bench, we are not allowed to be hyperactive, because then you can't learn the bullshit they want to indoctrinate you with. So it has
Yeah.
nothing to actually do with a disorder, but rather a socially unacceptable behavior type.
Yeah, and they don't like it when people have these disorders because, like I said, they don't listen to the mainstream narrative. There's that one Futurama episode where those brains, those floating brains, were taking over humanity by like social engineering them telepathically, and it worked on everyone except Fry because Fry was like too dumb to be socially engineered. And I'm not saying people with ADD are too dumb, but it's just like we have, like, again, an extreme intolerance for bullshit. So it's like, oh, you want me to learn this stupid thing in grade school that's not going to help me? Nope. I'm going to go learn about dinosaurs instead. Sorry. Like that's really all it is to it. So it is kind of like it comes off as kind of stupid in a way, but it's really not stupid. And I'm seeing more and more people diagnosed with ADHD and these things like bipolar disorder. And I think that's a major problem for the powers that be. Because I mean, at the end of the day, like they hot me up on all these methamphetamines, but I still question the system, and it didn't do anything. If anything, it got me focused on my studies, where I was interested in how the system is wrong. Like there's nothing they can do. There's no workaround. You know.
Yeah, and this also goes into my theory of our true essence, because just as, and I don't know if I mentioned this to you before, but if you think about us in a spiritual sense, what we actually are before we come here, uh, kids kind of represent our true essence in a way. So if you think about a creator being, that is, you know, a being that can imagine and create from that. What do kids do? Well, they imagine things and they play games with each other. They're basically like a creator being in a pure state without the indoctrination. And when you think about what a creator being would be able to do, they wouldn't have to wait for shit. So, you know, if they want something, they could create it just by imagining it. So the idea that you should be able to sit still for 8 hours in a chair and listen to something that is of no real use to you is like the opposite of what the nature of a creator being would be. So like the system is deliberately designed basically to be anti-true spirit. And you know, they'll punish and drug you if you adapt your actual true spirit and you act on those things. So it's kind of interesting how the system is actually set up to be like anti-spirit, and not just with finding information, seeking the truth and everything, but just like the core basics of what we actually are.
Yeah, that makes me think like, I'm biased because I have ADHD apparently, but maybe people with that diagnosis, they're more in touch with their true spirit. Because that's how I was as a kid. I was the same way as I am now. You just jump from topic to topic to topic, and you're enthralled with each thing, and you're very much focused on it, and you shut out the outside world. And certain patterns I've seen with people who have ADHD is they struggled a lot as a kid. They got into a lot of legal trouble with mundane things, usually just like not paying speeding tickets to the point where it was a problem. But then by the time they reached their 30s, a lot of them are becoming like successful entrepreneurs, and they're doing great because they finally like have found their stride. And it's like, because I think people with ADHD, they're willing to make all those mistakes in order to find what works for them. I feel like maybe they have more like bravery in that regard to just go out there and fail and then see what works.
Yeah, because basically the people who are not yet successful haven't learned yet to adapt to the matrix realm. So like they're still closer to the true essence, which means that they're not going to be able to sit down for 8 hours listening to something that doesn't make sense. But once you basically get indoctrinated, your will is broken down, you know, you're able to sit down and do what you're told, then you can be a successful business owner that does, you know, 30 pages of administration work for the government. You know, but like a true spirit would never want to do something like that. That is just the silliest thing ever. You could literally create whatever you wanted and you're gonna do governmental paperwork. Like that doesn't make any sense at all from a perspective of a spirit. So
Yeah,
basically
those are the people. Yeah.
yeah, so
Well,
the matrix like basically hurts your spirit. You know, it has to break you down in order to make you comply. which is
Yeah,
why,
and
you
those
know, you
people
can.
in those bureaucratic positions, those are the ones that like do the bidding of the Matrix inadvertently. I feel like they don't even realize what they're doing. And it's like I feel like the Matrix like has them. Those people in those high-end bureaucratic decision-making roles, they're the ones that are making things worse for everybody by passing more unnecessary laws and just stifling people in general. And it's like we do need to all learn how to have that almost like, I live in America, that American revolutionary spirit where you like look at the masses and you're like, no, I'm going to do my own thing and go my own way because I am my own sovereign spiritual being. And I know that you have a concept called like the changing this realm idea that kind of goes into that. Is that about like changing the realm to how you feel like is the best manifestation of your spirit?
Yeah, so when it comes to changing the realms, there's two different main perspectives that you can have on it. One is from the material world, and one is from like the spiritual perspective. So from the material world, it would be something like, make the government better, change things, politically, improve the NPC characters or people, as they would say. And then there's the spiritual realm, where it's basically an internal viewpoint work. So instead of focusing outward, it would be like an internal work. And something that you can hear in a lot of different, uh, strong cultured people is that, you're supposed to change the world, like person to person, not like in a society sense. Because when it comes down to it, all that really exists is just the individual spirits. So if you can change the spirits, you'll automatically change the world for those spirits in a way. Like even if the Matrix still runs its bullshit, you'll be able to change what actually matters by changing the individual spirits. It's like I think the perspective of what you're actually trying to achieve is very important. Because if you focus on it from the wrong perspective, then you're not going to be able to succeed.
Like going into the idea where you change yourself before the external world around you is able to change.
Yeah, or like what Jordan Peterson like to say, like, clean your room before you change the outside world. It's like if you focus on yourself, you're gonna be able to project that change, outwards. It's very similar to how like basically the NPC people, they act kind of like a hive mind, and whenever the public perception of something changes, they will change along with it. So during the Game of Thrones season 8, everybody loved the Game of Thrones series. They thought it was the most brilliant show ever, even though it had turned it really silly at that point. And then once enough spirited people, or aka smart people that can see the truth, were talking about how bad the show had become, something switched and the collective consciousness, changed. So like if you just talk to a NPC character about how they should not like the last season of Game of Thrones, it's never gonna work. They will never change their mind. But if the collective consciousness of the real spirits change, then there's the chance for the NPCs to adapt that kind of like personality, basically, because you project your own internal outward.
Yeah, when it comes to NPCs, I've kind of changed my idea a little bit of it. Like, I don't know if you've heard of like Dr. William Luther Pierce, but he spoke of something called like the lemming idea. And he discussed how he called them lemmings instead of NPCs, how they just go with whatever entity can provide for them their comforts and their security. So let's say, Jake, like you and I were the controllers who could provide people with Netflix and a house to live in. They would just simply adopt whatever ideals we pumped out to them through our mass media devices, whatever that may be. That's as simple. That's simply what they are, because it's like they don't have any higher ideals or anything. They don't understand because they don't want to understand. All they care about is having their basic needs met, like love and having a place to sleep at night and having fulfilling work. And that's it. That's as far as it goes. So I feel like that really, and that kind of goes into my video, The Frequency Matrix, where everybody's brain acts like a radio. That's what we are. And they simply tune to whatever they believe is the dominant frequency. And I feel it's like it's that simple. What about you?
Yeah, I think a lot of NPCs are basically programmed to follow whatever the hive mind says, or the main frequency, as you said. So, for example, I have a Matrix familiar, which is what I call my friends who are, NPC oriented. So basically, he's a very intelligent person, programmer. He's super smart, can do a bunch of stuff that I probably would never figure out how to do. But when it comes to a spiritual aspect or something that goes against the crowd, he has no ability at all to understand any basic logic whatsoever. And it's not even that he pretends not to understand it, because I've tested him, previously by presenting information from, this is what the norm is, but that wasn't actually the norm, just to like test what he would react with. And he would argue for those things in like weird ways that didn't make any sense at all. And then the next day, when he found out what the public view actually was, he would change his viewpoint completely, even though he just argued for those things. So like there's no consciousness being inside of that mind. It's just
But
like
it's
a
more so
machine.
their mentality is more just like, why would I care about that? My needs are met. Like I have my Netflix in my house. They're just like, what are you doing? They're like just confused. It's like, why are you talking against the system when the system provides me what I need?
Yeah, I mean, I understand that perspective, but it goes further than that, because these things also apply to like self-harm. So a person will literally harm themselves by following these kind of like routine systems. Like it's not just that the person perceives themselves as I want to be in the crowd because the crowd protects me, or something like that. The person will literally perform self-harm if they perceive that to be the public, opinion.
I
So
see what you're saying. I think a perfect example of that was that viral video of that Australian doctor who was wearing a mask and his 12-year-old son was in the emergency room. And then he said, yeah, my son just got extreme heart palpitations from receiving the you know what, but I still highly recommend that everyone still gets it and you're not hesitant about it. And that shows it's like even at the sacrifice of his own child, he's like still wants to perpetuate the system.
yeah, it's I don't know if you've seen that funny video. It's like dog intelligence versus human intelligence, and they show like dog food with like a doll, and you pretend to like eat it with the doll, and then the doll falls over and dies, and the dog like spits the food out. And then
That
on the other side of the screen you show the people getting the you know what, It's,
Yeah, yeah. Dogs are really intelligent because I saw another video where there was a bunch of puppies being milked, and the guy takes it and he's about to put a puppy in a stew with like cut up celery and stuff. And then the father dog comes and puts his paw over the soup, like no. And then the father dog like steps inside the soup and like looks up all sad, like saying, "I will sacrifice myself so you don't kill my puppy."
That's pretty dark.
Yeah, it is dark, but it just shows that like the word dog is close to God, and it's like a lot of dogs. They're just so innocent. They really do like teach us how to love. I feel like they're just close to God.
Yeah, I've always liked dogs. I know some people that don't like them, but I kind of like dogs, and it's kind of interesting too, because like the god of this realm would be like evil, but God is the reverse order of God, and like dog God, like if you write it reverse, so it's like
The
this
double
is the
negative,
yeah, so it's like the good version, because it's like the opposite way instead of going the evil way. So it's kind of cool that that kind of connects in that way.
right?
Yeah,
And you
but
have another.
yeah, yeah.
Sorry, what? No, I was gonna say you have another idea called like the consent idea. What is that again?
Oh yeah, yeah. Let's see here. I figured we should probably go a little bit more about the NPC idea before we go into that,
Oh
because it
yeah,
kind of ties into that
yeah.
afterwards.
What have you been researching? Because that's something that I also as well am constantly pondering. So I love to hear other people's perspective. Like, what else have you been thinking about it?
Yeah, so I mentioned how I called my NPC friends Matrix familiars, because I think that's a pretty fitting name. Like in a video game, you can get a familiar that will help you out, and this is kind of like a computer game reality. And like witches, they will have familiars that will do witchcraft. You can't really trust them completely, but they're still
Yeah, a
a
familiar
servant
is
of you.
also like a dog or a cat. I mean, that a necromancer will put a soul inside of.
Yeah, basically, but this would be like a soulless version of that, basically.
Gosh.
So yeah, but I just like that name. I'm trying to spread it. So basically, I can do a little rundown of my perspective of the NPCs. So when it comes to NPCs, I think there's two major like AI systems that run them, because I literally think this is just like an AI system, kind of like in a video game. So you have the individual AI for like the NPC. So when I talk to my computer programmer, Matrix Familiar, he has his own AI, and then when he watches Game of Thrones, the hive mind AI will take over, and he's gonna think that this is the best show ever. So like there's two different levels, and you can kind of see this with like crowds, because whenever you have like a big football crowd, people become generally dumber. They do the same things, they move the same way, they all stand up and sit down at the same time. If you're a spirited being, you might go along with it because it's fun or whatever. But like you could sit down, you know, and you can literally choose to not be, you know, driven into that energy. But the Matrix NPCs, they will literally flood like the waters, you know, after a dam
Dude,
break.
the perfect example of that is that one video. Do you remember it was a few months ago? All those somewhere in Asia, a bunch of Asian people were crowd crushed to death. I believe it was in South Korea. They just, you know, they got together too close, and I think like over 100 people died from suffocation. And you see one guy in the video like climb up this wooden pole in order to not get crushed. And you would think like, you know, people would observe that and they would all like follow suit and do it. But it's like these NPCs, they just stayed in the crowd and they just slowly died instead of simply climbing up a pole and saving themselves.
Yeah, it's I mean, in order to have imagination, you need something to imagine, you know. So like you need spirit because spirit is, you know, the consciousness plus the free will, and by free will you're able to imagine. So basically, the person who climbs up there is probably a spirited being. You know, he can think for himself. He's a spirit. So you can imagine a way out of this, but the crowd will do what the crowd is supposed to do because the AI control system
Dude,
controls what
and
they're
that's
gonna
an
do.
example of how you're right. Like they'll end up hurting themselves having this NPC mentality. So you're right.
Yeah, they literally have like they lack the processing mechanics to think for themselves because there is no thinker within to do it. So like they're literally just a machine, and like in a video game, you can only ask them specific questions because they're not programmed to answer any other.
Hmm. Yeah, and then you have to ask like how much of that is just from like these Rockefeller schools where it's like they teach them to basically work in a factory. And I've talked to people who've worked in Amazon and they're like, this is slavery. And they've found a way around slavery just by being able to pay people super, super low wages compared to how much profit the company is making. And then you look on a graph to the amount of money they're paying their factory workers, and it might as well be slavery when you look at the difference. And it's like it still amazes me that so many people, and I worked in a factory too, so I've put my time in doing that, and I can tell you it is very soul crushing. And I just think that like this world is set up in a way where it crushes your soul, from like our Rockefeller education system to so many working factory jobs. And some people do like it, and that doesn't mean that they're NPCs. But I think I still make my point here.
Yeah, I mean, it's still up for debate. Like, I'm pretty strong-minded when it comes to the NPC idea. It's, I think only a very small handful of beings on this Matrix realm are actually real.
Yeah,
It's,
Dr. Pierce with his lemmings idea, he did a rundown and he said that it's 90% are like the lemmings, as he says.
yeah, I expect it's even more than that. It's, I think it's a very small number of actual real people. I mean, I
Mhm.
could be wrong on that. You know, I'm completely open-minded to that. But from my perspective, it's very few people that's actually real.
Yes, and he was saying that these like subversion techniques, like the real war of information is over that 10%. Like the NPCs are just going to do what they do. But like to change the mind of like those 10% beings is like what they're really focused on. Like if this system was able to like convince the people who are totally against the jab to do it, oh, they would jump on that in a minute. They would spend untold amounts of money to figure that out, but they just can't crack the code. They can't crack the code of how do you subjugate a, a being with their soul to go against their better judgment. And I don't think you can ever do that unless you put like a boot on their neck. Like that's the only way.
Yeah, I mean, because you're real, you have freedom of choice. You know, freedom, like what I consider real. Like if I was gonna define it, I would do it by calling it consciousness plus free will. So like just by that definition, you know, like understanding of what someone who is real is, there's no way to actually force them to do anything. Like you can, you know, hold them down with a boot. You know, you can tie them up. You can force feed them, but like you're never gonna be able to change their worldview unless they allow you to.
Yeah. Yeah. Is that your consent idea?
Yeah, that kind of goes into it. So I can do a quick little rundown. I'm planning to make like a whole video on consent and like tie in my whole perspective, you know, and theory about the Matrix and everything, because there's a lot of debating at the moment about consent in the Matrix. A lot of people think that we did not consent to be here. Other people do think that we did, you know, so there's like some debating. So I'm gonna make a huge video about that. So I can do a little rundown of my baseline and I'm still working on, you know, the video, so it's not like complete yet. But if you'd like, I'll do a little rundown on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically, I can begin with like true reality. So my theory of true reality, and as I said, I'm still working on this stuff. So basically, if you imagine a field of, you know, reality, maybe it's not even a field, maybe it's just, you know, individual spirits, aka, you know, conscious beings with free will, you know, what people might refer to as creator beings. Now, if you imagine true reality basically being that, so you and I in our true state, we would be, you know, creator beings. We would be able to communicate with each other. We could imagine to create. So if I, for example, say red apple, then, you know, you're going to think of a red apple. So basically what I as a creator being have done is shared my imagination with you so you can experience the red apple. And if I would say red apple with the taste of banana, then you'll be able to, you know, imagine the texture of the apple, you know, the consistency with the weird taste of banana. Like literally I created an experience for you to experience. And by listening to me, you basically given a partial consent into listening to me, which means that I am now able to affect you in a way. So basically, as a creator being, the fundamental like communication is just sharing ideas with each other, you know, whatever you can imagine basically, and that would be at a higher level. So I talked about this kind of concept before. Basically, when people astral project, they're able to go internal and like meditate basically to like regain more awareness. So right now we would be 10 out of 10 lucid, but when they do this they can achieve like 15 out of 10 lucid state. And there's no like way for us to know how high that would actually go in a true state. We might be, you know, completely godlike in our intelligence level. Similar to when you go to sleep, you become less lucid than you are right now. So imagine when you're in your true state, like imagine this being a sleeping state basically. And when you wake up to your fullness, you'll be like way more intelligent basically, way more clear-minded. You'll be able to understand more, think clearer, you know, everything. So imagine a creator being with that kind of, you know, aspect and being able to share their, you know, imagination with each other. So basically the matrix construct in my idea is basically a creator being that made this idea basically of the matrix. And, you know, by consenting into different aspects of it, you know, slowly gaining, you know, memory losses, you know, consenting to different things, you'll eventually get trapped into this little, you know, imagination land, so to speak, kind of like in the South Park episode, you know, where they go to the imagination land and they can just like sing, you know, imagination, you know, and then like they come to this realm where if you think it, you can create it. You know, it kind of works like that, you know, if I would theorize about it. So, you know, if I say red apple with the taste of banana, I'm able to share, you know, my creation with you because you can now experience it, and it would be like a harder, you know, setting of that. So if you imagine these kind of beings, you know, in true reality realm or whatever you would call it, one being is like, hey, so I made this 3D Earth-like realm, and, you know, I'd like to share that experience with you. And you're like, okay, let's see what this is like. And, you know, you become a rock star, you do some surfboarding or, you know, whatever. And it's like, oh, this is really cool, you know, it's like going into a Minecraft game compared to us, you know, it looks all shitty, you know, in 3D. It's like I'm a multi-dimensional being, you know, this is kind of funny, you know, low graphics world or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then the guy is like, okay, this was really cool, right? So I have another idea. How about you remove your memories about what you actually are? That way you think you actually are the surfer, you actually are the rock star, and it's gonna be like way cooler. And you're like, okay, well, this guy is trustworthy, you know, like maybe I've never experienced deception before. And you're like, okay, I'll remove some of my memories, you know, about what I actually am, but I'll still retain my powers, you know, and way out and everything. And then you go through another lifetime, and as time goes on, basically, with each incarnation, so to speak, you might give away more and more consent, you know, more and more of your power is given away in order to have experiences. And, you know, at some point, maybe you have 1,000 real spirits in this matrix all playing memory loss games. And, you know, at that point, the matrix maker is like, snap. And then he suddenly, you know, introduces a bunch of karma, you know, ascended masters, all the new age stuff. And, you know, someone eventually leaves this realm, you know, because they die or something. And, you know, they're introduced to Jesus or something. And, you know, they're told that, oh, you have to reincarnate in order to, you know, do a better lifetime or something. And at that point, you're basically this ignorant spirit child that doesn't know what he's doing or what he is. And, like, without that knowledge, how do you get out of it? So like at that point you're stuck in this like reincarnation loop because you lack the knowledge of how to actually get out of it and what you actually are. So like when it comes to the whole consent idea of how we got here, you got to remember that it's not necessarily the case that people just consented to the whole thing at once. It could have been a partial step, like first this, then that, including a bunch of deception, because it's like something else that people need to understand is that consent in the legal term is not the same thing as consent in the spiritual realm. So when I said red apple with the taste of banana, you've already consented to listening to me, which means you're going to be affected by me. Like if I deceive you while talking right now, I make a lie or something. Did you know that I actually live in China? Like if I say that, that's a lie. So but you might start believing that because you've already consented to listening to me. So like I can deceive you in that kind of way. But just because I'm deceiving you doesn't mean that you haven't consented to listening to me. So like discernment and wisdom doesn't have anything to do with me, getting your consent to listen to me. So just because you're choosing to experience my, imagination land doesn't mean that I'm being honest when I'm presenting these things, which is why, I talk about being careful when you leave this matrix and create your own realms and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's why people with ADHD, it's like we don't consent to listening to the overarching authority. So it's like it never even happened to begin with. Like everybody else, they're like, oh, this dominant frequency, I guess we got to tune into this because it seems like it's in control. Then people with ADD, it's like, nah, I like this other frequency over here. So I'm just going to do my own thing.
Yeah, I mean, like basically you're non-complying, you're revoking your consent to listen to the bullshit. And that is considered very negative in this system. So they will literally drug you in order to make you consent. It's pretty sick actually when you think about it. So, but yeah, so yeah, I was also gonna mention something else. So, when people have a near-death experience, something that's pretty common is for people to view things in a 360 vision. Like yeah, you often hear things like "I knew everything, I could see all around me," things like that. So if you imagine a creator being, yeah, that is, just died. They don't know what they are, they have their belief systems about being a humanoid, with eyes and everything. Their own, humanoid intelligence, because, they think they're still sleeping, in their intelligence level, like I mentioned with our current waking hours. So basically, when they die, they're used to looking around to see things. So they're dead, they wake up, they think they're supposed to be gone now, maybe it's an atheist. So what do? Well, they have a habit of looking around to seek information, right? So they're gonna, without realizing it, put their intention into looking around. And because they're not limited by their body, they can't just look forward, they can look everywhere, and they want to see everything around them. So now they have 360 vision, because as a creative being, you could manifest that. And, these people don't realize that they're doing it, but they're still, putting their intention into doing it, which is why being aware of your own mind is very important. It's like if you start shaking your head or scratching your, I don't know, armpit or something, then like you may have put your intention into doing it, but you may not have been conscious of putting your intention into doing it. It's very important that you're cognitive of what you're actually doing. So yeah, so it's like yeah, I mean the person who sees in 360 vision for like he could just as easily have put his intention into seeing in echolocation like a bat. I mean, why not? Like the eyes is just a physical manifestation of the body. So why are you viewing things in a physical way? Like with eyesight, you could have just scanned it like with radio waves, or just been aware automatically of all your surroundings. And when it comes to this aspect, if someone is still within the matrix realm when they die, and they make the basically consent form to look around with the physical aspect of viewing things, that is a consent form to see things in the physical while within the matrix, because you're looking around, you want to see things, which means that the matrix now has permission to show you things in a visual fashion. So at this point the matrix could show you a 15 feet tall Jesus. That's a pretty common one. And then you're gonna be like, oh, I want to hear what Jesus has to say, and Jesus is like, yeah, come my child, you must reincarnate again, whatever story that it's gonna work on that individual. So basically, people tend to give consent away without even realizing they're doing it, because they're not aware of their own thought processes and their own actions. So being, stilling your mind in a way and controlling your own intention is a very important skill to have when you leave this matrix, because it ties
Yeah,
down to everything.
Right. And I think in the past, having discernment wasn't as important. Back when we could sort of trust the overarching system to generally send us in the right direction, whether it be with going to college or certain career paths. But now we're reaching an age where it's like, oh, wait a minute. Like, I wasn't offered a six-figure salary after completing my liberal arts education. Or wait a minute, maybe I should have rethought taking the jab. It's like there's so many different things we're like confronting now where it's like, oh, is this AI technology or is this an authentic voice I'm listening to on the internet? And it's like it's becoming more and more valuable with each new generation. Like, can you discern? Are you able to? And I think that that's going to be like a genetic expression that we see going forward, where it's like people who are able to discern, like they'll be having more kids. And I think having these disorders that the system labels like ADHD or even autism, those are the people with the highest levels of discernment. And we're seeing that the birth rates of those types of individuals are skyrocketing upwards. There's so many of them. And it's going to get to this like certain like point where the system's like, we have way too many aware individuals. Their discernment's way too high. No matter what sort of like insane CGI or AI manipulation we throw at them, they're able to Aikido it. Like they see right through it. And I just think it's all going to reach a crescendo where the system is going to reach the height of its power, but the people are also going to reach the height of their discernment. It'll be very interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, I really do hope that's gonna happen. It's I'm very negative when it comes to the development of this Matrix realm, but I'm very positive of the development of us as
But,
spirits.
and I understand why you're negative because I feel that way in a way too. But just look at like a Gen Zer compared to like a baby boomer, where I do believe that I feel like maybe boomers like maybe worked harder and they put in a little bit more grit, as they say, into their projects than Gen Z does. But I feel like Gen Z can see through bullshit better than previous generations can. But they don't apply themselves as hard because I feel like they're just not as motivated to. Because they talk to people like, oh, yeah, college didn't really do much to me. Oh, yeah, you know, climate change will just destroy everything anyway. So it's like I feel like they are at a higher level of awareness, but they're being bogged down by an overarching, more pessimistic control structure. Do you
Yeah,
see that at all?
yeah, I can see that, and it's when I look at my YouTube statistics, I notice that the average age is like 30 to 40 when it comes to my viewers. So I would imagine that even with a lot of self-spirited types of people coming in, it's probably gonna take them some time to like learn all they need to learn in order to be like fully developed as a spirit. So I mean, even I took basically 30 years to find out about the soul trap, and that is pretty common. Like there's some people who are younger than that, even below 18, but it's not. Sorry, but it's not the norm to be that young and
No,
discover these things.
it's not common, and the algorithms are a big reason behind that. But I feel like if we got away with these algorithms, I feel like a lot more people would be susceptible to the information. They'd be open to it. So it's like we're fighting an uphill battle, really. But I think we can always, I feel like human ingenuity can always find a way around whatever like technology that they create.
Yeah, and it's I'm a um, I I have a pretty strong sense that basically if your spirit or slash you seeks information, seeks the truth, then I don't think the Matrix is going to be able to stop you. I think just by
Yeah, so
having your
maybe that's a great point. So like maybe our tactic should be like inspiring people to like seek information instead of just like creating the information itself. Because if we inspire people to have that mindset, the universe will do the rest of the work for us.
yeah, it's I think literally you could manifest it even if you don't realize it, just as the eyesight with people newly die. If your intention is to seek the truth, you will find it at some point. It's like the old saying, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. I don't actually think
Seek
the
and you shall
Matrix can
find.
stop you from finding out about the truth if you actually decide to seek it. Something that I've noticed with the how the Matrix is designed is that there's always ways out of it. Like literally, you're not even stuck in this Matrix realm right now. Like you could, as I call it, uninstall anytime you wanted to. Like yeah, and kind of like in the movie Spirited Away, it's in order for her to stay in the fantasy land of that movie, she actually has to eat at some point. And in this Matrix, we actually have to eat, or we fade away at some point. So like the Matrix need constant consent in order for you to even be here. Like if you just refuse to play the rules, you just sit down and do nothing, you're eventually gonna fade away. So basically, the people, if we inspire them to seek the truth, I think they will do their own job basically to find the truth just by that intention alone. I don't think the Matrix can actually stop them. And this also goes into, because we were talking about the movie, TV show Upload. So basically, in this realm, they're stuck in this computer simulation. So theoretically, the Matrix holders of that realm could, freeze them into a jail cell or something, or refuse to uninstall their code, and they would be stuck there forever. But even in that TV show, there's like this vortex, like error code or something in the universe, where if you jump into this thing, your like coding gets deleted. So like even in that scenario, there's still a way out of it, and I think that is just like a fundamental law, basically, of true reality. That basically, if you revoke your consent, they're not going to be able to do stuff to you.
What do you mean you jump into it and your coding gets deleted?
Yeah, so I don't remember the exact details, but there's like some bug inside of this like artificial simulation world that he gets uploaded into, and people warn him that if you go into this thing, your code gets deleted. So there's like this bug thing between like the connection of the online world and like the realm that they're in or something like that. So basically that would be like not eating or uninstalling intentionally. It's similar to the ending of the Vanilla Sky movie, where in the end, he wants to get out of the dream world that he's stuck in, and in order to do that, he jumps off a building, because that is him, putting his, consent away. Like, I am no longer going to play in this game. So, like, I do think that there is, if you revoked your consent completely, the Matrix would never be able to keep you here. So, like,
and I think the healthy equivalent of that would be like just growing your own food and starting your own business would probably be the healthy version.
yeah, I mean, I can see that too. It's I'm more hardcore on these beliefs, so like, yeah, uninstalling because I want to talk about it in a friendlier way.
Yep.
But yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't consider this world to be the real world, so for me, it's like stop being a video game basically. But I understand that perspective too. And just by revoking your consent of like listening to the news or playing along with the game rules, it's I mean, some people, they don't even pay taxes anymore. They just live off the grid. Do their own thing, and it's like the Matrix for the most part leaves them alone. Because like they've revoked their consent. I talked to a person recently who he just doesn't comply with the system at all.
Good. So yeah, I think the last thing we wanted to talk about is like a lot of people are discussing with you in your Discord that you have about like handling trauma, and I feel like people have discovered a lot of like great ways to handle that in a more healthy manner in 2023. Like, what are some ideas that you've come up with?
Yeah, so when it comes to trauma of the Matrix, I have a series called, Dealing with Trauma on my YouTube. So, like, people can check out that. And something that's very important when it comes to trauma handling is the correct perspective and awareness of your own mind. So, just as a anger management person can get, really angry, and freak out and do a bunch of dumb stuff if he doesn't, pay attention to his own mind, but if he does pay attention to his own mind, he's able to calm himself down. So I think it's very important that you're very present with your own cognizant, patterns. So something I want to mention is so there's probably two aspects to your current, personality and viewpoints. So there's the true you in a limited state at the moment. You as a creator being, as a spirit, but in a limited form at the moment. And then there's also the matrix implants. So what people might refer to as, your matrix ego. So a person with the anger management problems would have like an ego basically, or an implant from the matrix that makes him more angry, But like if he chooses to control his own mind, he can cancel that out. And it might be difficult or whatever, but he still has the, ability to revoke the consent of the anger to basically control himself. So
Yeah, and yeah, sorry, go on.
yeah, so a lot of people suffer in many different ways, and a very common thing for people to do is to fuel their own suffering. So a person that is very black pilled about reality will be like, yeah, I hate this job, I hate this school, and they will just fuel their own suffering. But if they would just calm down and, you know, have the perspective of what I refer to as the car ride, you know, like if you're going to be stuck in this life for 80 years or 8 hours in a car, then, you know, if you start cramping around, you know, like feeling really tight in the spot, you know, you can't leave the car and everything, then you're going to freak out. If you just relax your mind and recognize, you know, where you're at the moment and just like chill out and look at the trees, then like your car ride is going to be way more easy. So I think the mental perspective and self-control is very important. And you know, there's also all of the traditional matrix, you know, dealing with trauma type of like psychology that people should probably look into as well. But I think the spiritual aspect of this is very important as well, because a lot of the stuff that affects us is not actually from us, but rather from the matrix itself. Just like how anger can affect you. And you know, understanding also the NPC thing. So like if your family abused you, like if you understand the NPC phenomenon and, you know, a life script, how people are supposed to, you know, have certain things happen to them according to their life script. If you understand these things, then, you know, dealing with the pain of having been abused, you know, of suffering different events can become lessened because you understand what's actually going on. It's similar to when people don't understand, you know, a war situation, they come home with PTSD. But if they can, you know, handle like the story of what happened to them, they can analyze it, they can like perceive what it was actually about, then the pain becomes bearable and understandable, which means that, you know, the mind can basically handle a situation like that coming up again. But if you don't understand what's actually going on to you, then the brain basically becomes, you know, hyperactive. Like, I have no idea why this happened to me, so now I'm terrified about it happening to me again, which is very common PTSD result. So basically, by self-knowledge, you can mitigate a lot of the pain, which is something, you know, I did to myself, basically. By understanding what actually happened during my life, I was able to mitigate, you know, and eventually remove my hatred of my own parents and all that kind of stuff. So I think that is a very important thing for removing pain, basically, to have that like self-understanding. So like introspection is very important for relieving trauma, in my viewpoint.
Yeah, one thing you said that's important is forgiving your parents. That's a big one. Because if you're still holding on to grudges, that's still giving a narrative for your ego to continue living off of.
Oh
You
yeah.
want to kill that ego. I mean, in a certain extent, I've heard certain people say this, you know, having some ego is a good thing because it motivates you and your character to create a beautiful story for yourself. But it's like it's up to you to create that narrative, that land for your ego to live in. Why would you create a narrative where you're on a revenge path, where you want vengeance for someone who wronged your ego? Why don't you, as you've talked about, what is it, changing this realm idea? Why don't you make a realm where your ego overcomes that and forgives all those that trespassed against him?
Yeah, I mean, there's people, you know, who will trash talk me even like currently, but like I don't take that personally. Like to me, that it means nothing to me, and I see other people getting really upset about those kinds of things. But that's because they're allowing their, you know, ego routines and all that kind of stuff, their perspective to be controlled rather than controlling it themselves. And you know that causes them a lot of pain. So instead of being self-aware of what they're doing, they're allowing their emotions and their, you know, matrix lives to control what they're gonna perceive the reality as.
Right. And those people that have like trauma, it's like, you know what, from my perspective, you haven't found like a calling that's worthy enough to take up your time. It's like you're still upset over these stupid little things that happened to you in the past. Like, in my opinion, it's like you have no life then if you're doing that. That's like the mentality of a loser. That's like the mentality of like a beta, I guess, to just like constantly dwell over stuff in the past instead of like building something in the future. And it's like, why would you want to be some weak part of the herd? That's what the masses do. That's like, yeah, that's what the lemmings do. The lemmings dwell over the past. It's that 10% that actually strive for something greater. They have some sort of project to work on.
Yeah, I completely understand that perspective. I think it's also important though that we understand that people do need time, you know, to handle all of the past experiences that they've had. It's you're not gonna become, you know, Giga Chad in one day, so to speak. It takes time to deal with these things. You know, it took a lot of time for me to do it as well, and I had to do it alone. I didn't have anyone to guide me when it comes to these things, so It's I mean, that's one of the reasons why I offer, free counseling, on my Discord server, or if people just want to contact me on my email or whatever. So
Nice.
uh when it comes to this, so a person, they will have their own ego in the matrix form, and then they will have their, true ego, what you actually are. And a lot of the trauma comes from mixing the two together. So I mean, if you play a video game and a character in the video game hits you and calls you all kinds of horrible things, steals your money, you're gonna be like, yeah, this is kind of a shitty game, maybe I should play something else. But if this happens in the matrix realm, you're gonna be like, my life is terrible, everybody hates me. But that's because you're misconstruing the two together. Like, you're viewing a video game as, you actually are. It's like you're misconstruing the two things. And I understand the perspective of people who have just a physical reality kind of perspective, so no like spirits or, soul trap perspectives. And it's like, even in that kind of perspective, I think the self awareness of, this is not something that you could, have stopped, basically. This is just another being, or, NPC, or whatever you want to call them, or a thing that happened to you. And, you don't have to let that define, what you're going to be feeling, how you're going to react and do. It's, you can control your own future, basically, by deciding, how you're going to react to things. And I know that's pretty hard when you, first start doing it, but just as an anger management person, if you make the choice, you can actually, forgive people, let things be in the past, deal with things as they are, the car ride that I was talking about. It's all about, the conscious observer choosing what to observe. Like, if you pay attention to the red apple, you're gonna see a red apple. But if you basically ignore the fucking anger management issues, you're not allowing them to control and define you. Just as the abuse isn't gonna be allowed to define you.
Yeah, you can never, don't rely on anyone to define you. You can always at any point like redefine who you are and then present that to reality. Because a lot of people, they define themselves by what they believe the outside world sees them at. It's like, oh, this person thinks I'm shy, so I'm gonna act shy. But you can like redefine who you are at any moment, at any second, because we're creator beings.
Yeah, exactly. And it's I mean, that's what I was talking about also with the whole, like, the people who are currently, talking ill about me and some other people. It's I don't let that bother me at all, because, whatever they do, like, that's not about me. So, like, it doesn't
What
matter
have
to
you been
me.
dealing with? You've been dealing with some e drama.
Yeah, basically, but to me, that is just funny, like, yeah, I understand the people who get really upset about these things, but I do think that they should basically, control their own minds and not let the trauma, control them. Because a lot of these things, it really doesn't matter. It's a bunch of Matrix, gameplay bullshit. It doesn't matter in any kind of way. And it's like, if someone, even from the perspective of, oh, we gotta, make sure the right perspective about things comes out, like, that isn't up to us. All a person can do, is provide information to someone, and the person will choose whether or not to, take that information. It's like, yeah, red apple, are you gonna listen or not? That is up to the individual, not to me who says red apple. So, like, it's not on me to, fix people's opinions. It's just for me to, allow people to see my viewpoints. So,
Nice.
and just like that, don't take in other people's viewpoints, if they're not beneficial to you.
Yeah, don't believe in anything that doesn't like help you. Like, why would you believe in depression if it doesn't help you? Whether it's true or not, whether it is a chemical imbalance or not, it actually serves you better to not believe in it, which is you've heard that all over the internet. Um, but yeah.
A lot of our
Do you
belief
agree with that, or am
systems.
I being too like obtuse about that?
Nah, I see what you're talking about. I think there's multiple perspectives on that aspect. So, for example, do you have the placebo effect, and then there's another one where it's like the disbelief of something will also affect what happens to you and how you, develop. So, I mean, I try to avoid beliefs at any cost, because, a belief is, be lie. So there's the word lie in belief. So it's
Yeah.
I try to, I think is what I use instead of I believe, because, it's a thinking process rather than a belief system. I think that's pretty important. So, I believe I'm a piece of shit because people think I'm a piece of shit, like, that is not a very good thing, and that can easily develop. So, if I instead a thinker, I can analyze things and be like, hey, what do you mean? I'm not a piece of shit, Like, what are you, stupid? You know? So,
Yeah, because if you're not careful, then you're going to be finding yourself on the same team as the person trying to bring you down if you hate yourself. If you hate yourself, you're going to be like, yeah, that person's right when he says I'm a piece of shit. I'm on their team. And it's like at that point, everyone's against you if you're not even on your own side.
oh yeah, that is super common for people who suffer trauma as well. They will project the trauma that's been inflicted upon them and then like on themselves. It's like they're manifesting the beliefs about themselves from other people, which is a really, bad thing for your psyche. So understanding, that you're not this piece of shit that the world tells you that you are, is very important. Which is why, I refer to people as, your fucking spirit. You're fucking awesome.
Yeah, I would say that like very few people are actually deserving of the title piece of shit. Like you'd have to do some pretty bad things to do that. And it's like you're probably not that like in up there on that level. You've probably just done some trivial things that are kind of cringe. You're probably not a total piece of shit, most likely. You're not that special.
Yeah,
I just want to like
even
sorry,
with the
go
whole
on.
piece of shit thing, it's I mean, even if someone is, I don't want to, denounce them or anything like that, because that kind of locks
No
them into a
disrespect to the
box.
pieces of shit.
Yeah, so basically, I mean, I'm very forgiving in a way. Like even the demiurge, if he would change his ways, I would forgive him. Like I don't have any resentments towards the demiurge for being in this torture matrix or whatever. So like
Yeah,
if
I mean, you got to feel bad for this metaphor, this concept of the demiurge. If they were cast out by Sophia and they're just stuck in their own fake realm, it's like that's someone to pity.
oh
Really, that's
yeah,
like Milton's book Paradise Lost, where he pities the devil.
imagine the psyche of such a being that would create a world like this. Like that is a sad existence. Like if anything, like in the Harry Potter book, like when Voldemort is trying to manipulate Harry, he's like, uh, I feel sorry for you. That's his response to him when he tries to
And it's
manipulate
like,
him.
I don't think about you at all.
Yeah, basically. So yeah, so I think cognitive, behavior, analyzing your own perspectives, making sure you don't let other people's views control you, whether it be the views that you've gained from the abuse or the suffering or whatever. Like choose your own mindset. Don't allow the external world to define what you are.
Yes, it almost sounds cliche, but it's something we need to be reminded of constantly. I just want to consult the comments here. Andrew T, check out Sat Yoga. I'm not sure what that is, Andrew, but this guy actually sent me some cigars here. I just want to say thank you, Andrew, for mailing them to me. He lives in Colorado. I've been smoking them, and they're really cool looking. They are you can tell they're a little bit old, but they still taste good, and they have really cool vintage stickers on them. So I just want to say thank you again. Byron, the NPC normies are mostly miserable. Yeah, I would say the majority of people in the Western world have some like mental issues, because they've given their power away to a system that hates them, and that's going to be the inevitable byproduct. And he says a lot of people are running bad programs. Yeah, that goes in with what I just said. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, any remarks there?
especially with the current clown world of this reality, because in order to be a follower, you literally have to adapt clown world, which is going to cause cognitive dissonance and all kinds of mental problems.
Yeah, that's why I need my cigars here. They calm me down. And Andrew, I was a little bit concerned because Fidel Castro, the CIA, they tried to assassinate him by poisoning his cigars and sending them to him. But then he just got lucky and he never smoked them. So I'm glad they. Thank you for not poisoning them.
But by the way, I wanted to mention something else when it comes to the whole trauma handling. Having some kind of like purpose in your existence is a pretty good step forward to not, being all dramatic about your existence. So, for example, when I first started learning about the soul trap, I got really fucking depressed. And, going to work became a huge pain because, like, why should I even be here anymore? Like, I know my way out, I'm just suffering, 8 to 9. Like, there's no point to my existence anymore. But, once I started, making a YouTube channel trying to help other people, there became like a purpose to being here. And, that kind of thing basically goes hand in hand with, not suffering too much, because if you have no fucking purpose at all to being in a torture dungeon, then the torture becomes unbearable. So I kind of want to mention that because, for example, there's a book called The Gift from Galataya, which is like a 2-book series so far, by a spirited being. So basically, just as I make, YouTube videos to help people, I talk to people, free counseling or whatever. Having some kind of like reason for being here is, a pretty good, booster to your mental state. And that could be just as easy as, discovering more about the soul trap, learning more about your true self, even just helping someone around you, be they spirited or non-spirited, some kind of, positive input into like your actual, existence there. Because if there's nothing, that is positively developing, then, you're just torturing yourself in a chair, doing nothing. Like that's not a good existence for 80 years.
Yeah, a lot of people lack purpose in the modern world. And back in the day, they had, even though the purpose was trivial, it was like, oh, I got to get up and feed the chickens. I got to make sure my kid gets homeschooled on time. It seems on the outside very stupid, boring, trivial, but it did give them probably more purpose than even like a YouTube channel. I mean, that's what gives us purpose in the modern world. And I'm guilty of that too. That's a big purpose of mine as well. And it's like, well, maybe they were right back then where I should be focusing more on family, I guess. But yeah, we just are really lacking that in the modern world.
Oh yeah, that's why I mentioned the book that one of our spirited, brothers, so to speak, wrote. Because like, yeah, that story is, a way for, younger audiences to start learning about the soul trap concepts. So like, yeah, because it's about that kind of aspect. So I think that's a pretty, cool, interesting idea, to have some kind of like purpose within your existence, while you're still here, to actually do something of value.
Yeah, and I think we live in unprecedented times where that purpose can expand to a bunch of different categories with our access to the internet. Like you can have your own online business and you can have your like spouse and kids. And if you do your time management right, you can build a really meaningful, beautiful life where you can have a lot of different artistic expressions. And just one little thing I wanted to add in here for other people who may have ADD, or this is just good advice in general. If you really struggle with time management and getting things done, I found that it helps utilizing the timer on my phone, being like, okay, I have 1 hour to finish this task of cleaning the house or finishing this script. And then you set like 30 minutes on your phone to do it. And that puts you in the mode of like, okay, I got to do it. Because a lot of people with ADD, they get easily distracted and thrown into all these different directions. But if you have that physical timer going, that is like something that cements you to this world. Like the top in that one movie with Leonardo DiCaprio when he's in dreams. What's it called? Jake?
Which one again? It's
Leonardo DiCaprio when he's in the dream world
Oh,
and he's jumping.
Inception. Yeah, yeah.
Inception. It's like Inception where it's like you have that thing to like get you cemented into reality. So I feel like a lot of creatives or people with ADD, it's like you're not cemented in reality a lot. Like you're always like thinking of higher realms and stuff, and you need something to remind you like you're still on Earth and you have your material things that you need to get done. So yeah.
Yeah, that's well said. So, oh yeah, I wanted to mention something else about the whole ADHD thing. I've
Yeah.
noticed that, and like I've known a person who was diagnosed with it. It's if it's something interesting that they don't have problems concentrating on it. It's like usually it's the
Right.
boring, mundane, doesn't make any sense type of thing that they're not able to concentrate on, which is pretty telling when it comes to that kind of aspect. It's more of a disinterest in bullshit rather than the inability to actually counter it. It's like, yeah, it may be harder for people just as the anger management issue, but it's like I have problems concentrating sometimes, and I've been developing it. It's like I can listen to people now for hours, but in the past there'd be no way for me to actually succeed with that. So
Yeah,
yeah.
like I said, it's like once you hit your 30, I think you said your 30s, it's like you just get better at understanding how to deal with your brain because you can like look at your peers around you and be like, wow, I feel like my brain works differently than other people. So the system isn't designed to like help you fulfill your goals because the system doesn't understand you. And quite frankly, a lot of the aspects of the system don't even want people like that around. They don't like the people that think outside of the box. So it's working against you. So it's like these people that are diagnosed with these issues that the modern world doesn't understand. It's like you are kind of on your own in a way, but that's good because that's going to teach you independence. And I bet you that that's something that you can carry with you into the next life. If we have a next life, I bet it's going to come in handy because a lot of people, they're just going to go with whatever the flow, wherever the flow takes them in the next life. and they might fall for some things that they regret later on. But if you understand how to cement your independence in this very difficult, thick material world, it'll be a breeze in the next one.
Yeah, I think
And
that's
maybe
a
that's me
really
being
good point.
really optimistic, but yeah,
No,
that's what
I
I
think
think.
you're right on spot with that. And it's something that you notice from the NDE stories is that, you know, the common trait of all the NDE people is that they're very obedient, you know, crowd following, you know, they will listen to people and so on. They don't have this like independent gangster cigar smoking attitude where they're like telling the Matrix what is what, you know? Like they're very
Mhm.
Jesus tell me what to do kind of persons, you know? So like having that individualistic, yeah, viewpoint, you know, and like mindset and just like becoming that type of person is probably a really good idea before you die so that it's a natural behavior to you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that the modern world gives us a very special opportunity to really learn that about ourselves. Because back in the day, it's like you needed your little tribe in order to survive. So going along with whatever the crew wanted you to do was probably a good thing 99% of the time. So it's like maybe those people back in our previous reincarnations, they weren't given the amazing opportunity that we have today. Perhaps our ancestors are jealous of like the spiritual opportunities that we have, even though a lot of people do have more mental issues these days. But yeah, so I want to end it with a positive note right there. But Jake, do you have anything else to add here?
Let me check my list just in case there was something I missed. Uh, no, we went through most of the things. It's I mentioned how I'm planning to upload a video and sometimes in the future about the consent idea, bring in my whole perspective about the matrix on it, so that you know the question of did we consent or not can you know be put to rest at some point, because I think that's a pretty important question. If you think that we were basically forced to be here, then there's a huge, you know, red flag about that because basically you can manifest the belief system that you have that you're forced to be here. You know, kind of like what I was talking about in my escape guide. If you believe in a god, you might manifest the idea of that god and be trapped in some realm that you create for yourself, basically. So having a belief system that is very negative is like super dangerous to your, you know, spiritual freedom. So that is the, you know, the main reason why I want to make a video on the whole consent idea, because I think that's a pretty dangerous idea basically at the moment for a lot of people.
Yeah, yeah, don't get too wrapped up in that. Just like if you're listening to content like this, understand that you are able to just rip up any contracts you took. I feel like you have that ability and power to do that for sure.
Yeah, just revoke your consent to any bullshit. You know, be like, I am an individual sovereign being and I represent no character, as you know the Rick and Morty episode would say.
Yeah, yeah, you got this. We got this. So, all right, yeah, Jake, this was awesome. Hopefully, we'll talk again soon. And yeah, thanks everybody for listening. More content will be out soon from both of us. So, have a good night.